Hello, everyone. I am Ben Johnson, and this is the Perpetual Chess Podcast. Perpetual Chess is a weekly interview show where top chess players, authors, content creators, and accomplished amateurs discuss their careers and share stories and chess improvement tips. Perpetual Chess is a part of the Blue Wire Podcast Network, and we'd like to give special thanks to our presenting chess education sponsor, Chessable.com. For more information about the show, you can go to perpetualchesspod.com. But without further ado, let's get to the show. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Perpetual Chess. We are joined this week by a guest who is a distinguished guest from sort of outside the chess world, but also very in the chess world. He is an author, a psychology professor at the Queens College of the City University of New York. He specializes in late life depression and cognitive impairment. He's also a practicing clinical psychologist. He's an avid chess player, if you're wondering why he's on a chess podcast. He began tournament chess as an adult, age 33, and has reached the USCF 2000, which used to be called expert. It's a bit more confusing now, but I still think of it as USCF expert. He's a chess author and frequent collaborator with Grandmaster Boris Gulko. They had a series called Lessons with the Grandmaster, which is very highly regarded. And their latest book is Analyzing the Chess Mind, which I just read, new this year from Quality Chess, which also goes deep into chess psychology, but also has lots of chess improvement advice from Grandmaster Gulko. And I'm excited to welcome to the show Dr. Joel Sneed. Welcome, Joel.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, exciting. You come highly recommended by Kostya Kavutskiy. What's your relationship with Kostya?
Just was fortunate enough to that he was willing to teach me a little bit. So we had some lessons together, and trying to improve my game. I've had lessons with a lot of strong players, trying to improve my game, and he was one of them, and I thought he was fantastic, and I think what they're doing at the chess dojo is fantastic, and so he was kind enough to put me in touch with you.
Great. Yeah, and not to put any pressure on you, Joel, but Kostya said that you're funny.
I don't think I'll be funny today, but I'll try to be.
All right, we'll see. But aside from the Chess Dojo talk, which of course I agree with you, they're doing fantastic work, I wanted to start with your chess origins, because we were just chatting a bit before we hit record, and a lot of chess origin stories I find to be broadly similar. A lot of us learn chess from our parents and get tossed into the tournament arena one way or another, but you have a pretty unique chess tournament origin story. Do you mind sharing it with our listeners, Joel?
Sure. As I said, I learned how to play at 24, I guess it was. I think it was around 24. I remember I used to play my father-in-law, and we were both quite bad, and I learned the rules a little bit, and then I didn't play again for another 5 or 6 years, and I was interning. When you do a PhD in psychology, the final step in the clinical psychology PhD is an internship at a hospital, a psychiatric hospital, and I was at Bellevue Hospital, and I was treating a 10-year-old kid, and at the office that I was in, there was a chessboard. They have many times when you treat kids, you have games to play to sort of break the ice and to have something to do while you're talking with kids, and so checkers and chess and those types of things. And he said, looked over at the shelf and said, "Why don't we play chess?" And I said, "Okay." I knew the rules of the game, so we started to play, and we played for 3 or 4 months together. And the following, when I finished my internship, I did a postdoc in statistics at NYU, in math and statistics at NYU. And NYU, for those who don't know, is situated in the West Village of New York City, and right around the corner from NYU was a very cool, famous shop called the Chess Shop, and it was on Thompson Street, and local people in New York will remember it, at least the old timers. And I started to go, and it was back when there was smoking, and God, it was just a cloud of smoke and old people drinking coffee, and I would come out with migraines, but I loved it.
Yeah.
I just loved to play there, and so I went every lunch break, every day at lunch, and took lessons from Richie Gilmartin and even David Canty, who's a regular at the Marshall still, and I've known him now for 20 plus years, and we just started the whole thing, and met my friend Uri Feld there, and it was just sort of a chess thing, and then we went to finally started to, got the courage up to play a tournament game at the Marshall, and that was we went to the U.S. Amateur Team East tournaments and that kind of stuff. That was the early days.
Nice. Yeah. And again, for listeners, so at age 33, he played his first tournament and made it to over 2,000. And it's pretty slow and steady progress. It's kind of the dream for a lot of people, I think, who listen to this podcast. And you've written, Joel, that you learn a lot. Part of the reason that you've put this time into chess, obviously pretty successful outside of chess and a lot going on, is that you learn a lot about yourself. So what has this experience taught you about yourself over the years?
Oh, that I'm extremely obsessional, and
if you didn't know that already, right?
I didn't know that. But you just sort of repeat the same mistakes over and over again, expecting different results, right?
Right.
Yeah, I mean, that was one of the great things that Boris said, actually, in our first, the very beginning of, I think it's the introduction of the first Lessons with Grandmaster book. He said, paraphrasing, but basically he said, chess always corrects your self-assessment. And he had the complete opposite situation. He felt like he was overly confident. And of course, we're talking about,
if I were Boris Gulko, I'd be overconfident.
I'd be overly confident too. Yeah.
Yeah.
But he had, he was, this is USSR 19, mid 70s, right? And he felt like he was overly confident, and he said this really important thing, like, chess always corrects your self-assessment. And so that started me thinking about, like, well, the chess psychology of it, like, how much of us is in this game, because I don't think that was not what I was attracted to when I started playing. I was attracted to it because I liked the beauty of end games, like that, I find the aesthetics of end games and the mathematics of material, to be, I find that and the logic, and Smyslov talks about that in his book, right? He talks about the beauty, the truth in the chessboard. And I feel like, okay, if I'm winning by a piece, I'm going to win the game. Like, that's it. It's over. That's not, of course, the truth, because there are other factors. But I just really loved that part of it. And so, yeah, I've been reflecting a lot recently about this idea about chess being science and art and sport. And the sport part of it, I really don't like. I just don't care for winning, for winning's sake. I want the game to be, something that I've done well, or I don't want something pretty in it, or aesthetically
That's nice.
pleasing.
Yeah, sorry to cut you off. I've noticed some people have that mindset, and some people come from a more sort of Street Fighter perspective where they enjoy the competition. And I've noticed that people who like the artistic element more, which obviously I certainly understand, they can be more easily steered away from tournament chess. Do you like, as opposed to just enjoying the game, reading books and stuff like that? Does that ring true to you, Joel?
Well, I certainly find the competition part of it unpleasant. I feel like I'm in, it's the Ulf Andersson school, right? You just had that great podcast with Ulf Andersson, which was fantastic to finally hear from him.
Yeah.
He's like very hard to find. I've tried to find him because I, obviously like that kind of chess. And yeah, I just want to like have a cup of tea and sit and think about stuff for a really long time. So there's this thing in psychology, we call it need for cognition. And it's just it's people that like me, and I would imagine a lot of people in chess, like to analyze, right? Like to think and solve problems. Like it's fun, it's enjoyable, just that. So we would all score high on need for cognition, and that's what Ulf is talking about in that interview. He's talking about how pleasant and enjoyable it is to think, put your head in your hands and think about a position for a really long time, and like shorter time controls and the sport of it, just and it's just stressful, like he says. It's
Yeah.
stressful, and it's not enjoyable. So when I play tournament games, what I struggle with, win or lose, is that I never want to experience what I experienced that night again. So
Right.
it's like, oh my God, that was terrible. Win or lose, like I win games, and I was like, that was horrible. I don't want to experience what I just experienced, even if I've won the game, because it was stressful, so stressful to win the game. There's always a clock, there's always time pressure now. You don't win with half an hour on your clock anymore. It's a time scramble always, and it's just very stressful now. And it
Yeah.
used to be much more, okay. So maybe there's some age factor going on there that he was talking about, that it's just less pleasant to be involved in that.
Yeah, I can certainly relate to that, having had a tournament with some challenges, as I alluded to recently. I didn't mention in the Dean tournament, I did manage to win my last three games, so I avoided abject disaster, but it brought home the lesson. And I was talking about this with my friend and friend of the pod, Evan Rosenberg, when I was 0-3. Like, even for me, and I totally get that feeling of unpleasantness, but I also like I find the ability to concentrate so redemptive that it keeps me coming back. But nonetheless, the bottom line is the highs are not nearly as high as the lows are low, and I've heard a lot
Right.
of chess players lament that.
Right. Well, it's like remembering the things you do wrong on a test.
Right.
Right. You don't remember the 95 questions you got right. You remember all the ones you got wrong, or you think you got wrong. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's yeah, no, we had the same tournament experience. I lost those three games, and then I managed to win the last three, but boy, I didn't, it was terrible.
Yeah, so to set the stage for listeners, so Joel has been playing when circumstances can allow over the past 18 years of tournaments, and has gone from his first rating was about 1200, and he made it over 2000 USCF. But his last tournament was in May of this year, and Joel had been telling me he had a rough tournament. He went 0-3, so now there's a bit of a crisis of conscience about like what to do next. So while that's going on, Joel, are you still taking lessons, and do you have a foot in the chess world?
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. I'm doing lots of stuff. I'm still taking lessons. I play all the time. Um, I'm working on a couple of different chess projects. Um, I don't know if it's a good time to talk about some of those. I'm working on a couple of different projects. I'm writing a book on the Caro Can with Keith Arkle,
Oh, cool.
Grandmaster Keith Arkle in Britain, and I think I'm starting to, which I was going to talk to you, but not necessarily on the podcast, about. I want to do like a YouTube series on a lesson with the Grandmaster, the series,
Okay.
because I've taken a lot of lessons with strong players. I really enjoy talking to really strong chess players about everything chess, and like you do, right? I mean, you get to do that too, but on an even
Yeah.
higher level, talking to world champions and stuff. But I really enjoy that, and taking lessons from them and getting their perspective and their opinions and their advice. So I've met with and talked with a lot of really good players, and I thought, why not turn that into a YouTube series, and we'll just, a continuation of the lessons with a Grandmaster idea, and have and put it up on YouTube, and let people see maybe the people that I'm talking to, they'll be like, I really like the way that guy taught, or I like that guy's perspective or his repertoire. And maybe I'll contact him. And so it could be a way to, talk about, books that are coming out, or coaches that are less well known. I think a lot of people see people on streaming and Twitch and all that kind of stuff, and there are about 10 or 15 of these famous people, but there are like hundreds of really, really strong chess players in the world that that you can go see and talk to, and get coaching advice and stuff from.
Yeah, I mean, someone like Boris Gulko, who, to be clear for any newer listeners, is an absolute legend. U.S. champion and played in candidate cycles, and wrote in your first book about coming up with playing against Karpov and all these other Soviet era legends. But someone like him, like he's pretty off the radar these days. Like he writes, he does his collaborations with you. But as far as I know, he doesn't have like a big online footprint. I know he emigrated to the U.S., but I don't know where he lives or anything like that. And there's so many just incredibly accomplished and brilliant people.
That whole era, that entire era. Romanishin lives in Ukraine, and Faganyan. Belyavsky, right? There are all these like phenomenal chess players, like top 10 chess players from the 80s that are probably 65 now, 70. And, we're talking world-class players. We're talking about like people at the level of Nakamura, and, 30 years ago. And they have a lot to offer, really like an amazing amount to offer.
Yeah, and of course, Gulko has the insane story of like the prime years of his chess career being robbed. From
7 years.
Yeah, from age 32 to 39 to not be able to compete because he was trying to get out of the Soviet Union, and therefore they weren't inviting him to tournaments. I mean,
that's how I met him. My father-in-law and my wife's family were also in the same boat, refuseniks in the former Soviet Union. And that's how I met him. I met him through my father-in-law.
Oh, wow. So not a chess connection, or?
No, synagogue.
Wow. All right. That's how you meet Gulko.
I think so. And he's like, I remember that. He's like, I sit next to him at the synagogue. And so he put me in touch with him. But I think Boris lives in Israel now.
Okay.
There's all those legends from, they're around. I mean, not all of them are, like Ulf Andersson, for example, is not very approachable because he, doesn't have internet, and you have to go train in some cave in Sweden somewhere.
I love it. Yeah, so analog. It's beautiful.
You can't bring an electronic clock. It has to be the old one with the wind up in the back.
Right, but of course, in our interview, he's like, these computers, they're useful.
Great.
Shout out to Ulf Andersson if you catch with that. Obviously, a honor of a lifetime to get to chat with him, but you admire the purity for sure.
Yeah, it's my favorite player. Yeah, what a great player.
Yeah. So bringing it back to your tournament chess, because I want to get sort of more broadly into chess psychology as the conversation goes on, Joel. So you had a rough tournament and you haven't been motivated to play since then. That's something I think a lot of listeners will find relatable. Me too. So if you had a friend contact you and say they were in that situation, but they did want to play again, in theory, like what would you advise them?
It's just a symptom of obsessional doubt, right? I mean, that's essentially what it is. And, the answer is very, very simple. So when I work with my patients, I have a saying that I repeat hundreds, if not thousands of times, and that is approach, don't avoid. And it's the single most useful thing that you can do to treat any kind of anxiety, right? And I think that this falls under a fear that I talk about in the chapter on improving your chess psychology about fear of losing, right? I think it's the quote from, well, anyway, there's a quote in the book that you move from, oh, John Watson, right? Cy sent me an article from like 1981, an interview with John Watson, and he says something about moving from being interested in sort of in chess, like in the exploration of chess, to being afraid of losing. And it has something to do, I think, with the meaning of the rating points in our mind, in our unconscious, that has something to do with our status and how we feel about ourselves and our self-esteem. And when all of that is on the line, and it is for a lot of people, and your intelligence too, right? Like, I think there's a huge amount, especially mostly in chess, or peculiarly in chess, right? Where somehow your chess is like when you meet someone, you say, oh, you play chess, you must be smart. Like, and anytime they want to like talk, they wanted to show in literature and art and movies and everything, they want to convey someone thinking. It's like there's a chessboard around. And so we identify somehow in our minds with this idea that, chess makes us smart or is somehow connected with being smart. And when you have some doubt about how smart you are, and I certainly do, all of that's on the line when I play.
Right.
And that's a lot. Like, it's just a game, but it's not, and it's connected. I disagree with most of everything that Ruben Fine wrote about in his chess psychology book as a psychoanalyst, but the connection between the pieces in the game and your unconscious and what's going on in your unconscious is very true. Like, that's right up front and center. So I think that trying to acknowledge, being honest with yourself about being honest with yourself about what's at stake can be helpful in terms of getting yourself back into it. And I think in that, this hypothetical friend, I would say approach, don't avoid. And that's what I tell myself. I tell myself, okay, it's time to get back into it. And you just have to, it's like a cold shower. You just have to do it, and prepare yourself a little bit, start doing some tactics, and just get back in there. But I have so much obsessional doubt about, my game, my openings, my this, my that it's just very, very difficult for me to finally pull the trigger and get in there again.
Yeah. And for me, it often feels like it's like going to the gym when it's out of your routine, it's easy to just push back. Like, I always feel like I need some runway if I'm going to actually pursue tournaments. I'm not one of these people who I've learned that I can't be one of these people that just shows up every 6 months, because the results are going to be so bad that it's going to deter me from wanting to show up again. Whereas if I'm competing regularly, then the results start to move at least in the right direction. But
yeah, you have to be informed. Yeah. And you have to play yourself. I mean, I've had many lessons where the stronger player in the lesson, right, the teacher, would be, oh, you're just in bad form.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Like, even just practical stuff like being up a piece and converting a game, and that kind of stuff. Not that that's easy to do, but it's easier when you're in practice and you're in practical. You've been playing, regularly. Tournament games, like, there's a whole nother. It's not. Yeah. It's not this online stuff.
Yeah, it's just a whole different animal. All right, well, Joel, we have one related Patreon mailbag question. Listeners who support Perpetual Chess are able to send in questions. We haven't had a lot of questions lately, so I'm glad to have a few good ones for Joel, and always good to have the support of generous Perpetual Chess listeners. And this one is from longtime friend, supporter of the pod, Tyron Ross Price, who on these notes asks if you could share any tips for getting into a beneficial mindset before a tournament. And you write about this some in the book, which, by the way, the book is fantastic. And as Joel alluded to, his chapter about psychology, some of the chapters are game analysis by Grandmaster Gulko, which of course are also great, but more in the traditional chess manual mindset, although there is a psychological angle to them. But Joel's chapter is worth its weight and available on Forward Chess. But anyway, do you need me to repeat Tyron's question after that long digression, Joel?
He asked about
beneficial mindset.
Yeah, I do talk about that in the book. I mean, there's stuff that there are things that I've done that, I mean, I don't honestly know if they are helpful, but things that I have picked up on over the years, just talking to strong players, getting, well, what do you do, and all that kind of stuff. And as it's probably clear, like I get pretty anxious before the games when I go to play tournament games. Like, it's not really a comfortable experience. So I'm pretty up and intense and jacked up on adrenaline, and so I have to learn how to kind of calm down. And I find having like a regular routine to be very helpful. So like just showing up at a tournament that you've never been to before, not being aware of the surroundings, not knowing where the tournament hall is, where you're going to play, what board you're on, all that stuff, keeps you from kind of focusing on the game and your mindset. And so I prefer to do a lot of rehearsal, and I talk about this with patients all the time, especially patients with social anxiety that suffer from the anxiety of sort of the crippling anxiety of feeling like they're being evaluated by people that they're talking to. So when I work with people like that, I emphasize a lot about rehearsal that I think is very useful. Like when I used to give talks in psychology when I was young, you have to get up in front of a couple of hundred people and deliver a research talk, and you're always terrified that there's going to be some genius in the audience who's going to just tear your research apart, and it's a terribly anxiety provoking experience, especially when you're young. And now it's much less anxiety, and I imagine that's true for experienced chess players, right? Much less anxiety for them to play chess. So there's something to that, right? So the more you do it, the less anxiety there will be, and you can calm down and focus on your game. But what I was saying about those talks, those psychology talks, was, I used to do a lot to prepare for them, right? I would practice my talk. I would go to the venue to make sure I knew where it was. I would, if I could, I'd even get in there and put the talk up on the screen when the room is empty, and just kind of run through my talk. And so, and sort of just be in the room where I was giving the talk. And I think you can use that as a kind of a metaphor for chess preparation, right? So preparing yourself, there's the perennial stuff, like, are my openings intact, and I've been doing my tactical training, and have I been playing regularly, that kind of stuff. But then there's just the logistic stuff about the playing conditions and the hall and your routine, like where are you, what's your setup going into the game that day? Is it like, are you running around picking up the kids and getting them to daycare or off to school or to their after school program, and then getting in the car and going there, and then getting dinner ready, and then running off to the tournament where you haven't had a minute to think. And then you get to the tournament and you're like, okay, it's like, let's play a chess game. Your mind is not in it, So I think there's a lot of useful stuff in terms of being in a good mindset for playing, where in preparing in terms of the sort of the practical stuff, not just the chess stuff. Having a routine reduces anxiety about all those things that I was just talking about. You go to the same coffee shop, get the same coffee. You already have your, let's say you're playing a real 4-hour game or something like that. You might need some kind of mid-game snack of some kind. I always remember Boris said someone used to like chocolate. Maybe it was Smyslov or Tal or something like that. So I always bring chocolate with me in the 2 hours into the game, I have a piece of chocolate, that kind of stuff. And I remember Boris telling me not to eat too much, like don't eat a big dinner and then go play because you get sleepy and all that kind of stuff. So, those are like little practical things. And then in the book, I talk about chess. I talk about visualization exercises, and this is exactly kind of what the question, to answer that. A part of answering that question would be having the time to think about your what you're just about to do. Like, can you sit down kind of in a meditative way and like walk yourself through what's going to happen? You're at the board. Who's your opponent? They say, okay, you can start your clocks. You shake your hands. You have your coffee. You've got your chocolate. And you really kind of walk through it. When you get to the board, you've already been there. You're already there, and that I think is a level of concentration and preparation that goes well beyond just I'm ready, my openings are up, and I've been playing.
Great advice, yeah. But I know it can be challenging because, like Tyron, I know you live in North Jersey. You're able to play in your local chess club. You play at the Marshall frequently, so you often would know the surroundings. But I think for a lot of people, it's more like weekend getaways.
Right.
And in that case, how could you adapt it if you're you're getting there that morning,
Yeah, no, that's exactly the point about the chess talk, the psych talks that I would give. So the conferences that I'm talking about, these are national conferences that are always in sort of big cities, San Francisco, LA, and Toronto, and some Puerto Rico, maybe if you're lucky. Mm-hmm. Philadelphia, Washington D.C., Boston, New York, right? So that's exactly what I'm talking about. You're in a strange city. So how do you prepare yourself? You get there early, right? You scope out the scene. Go to the tournament place. It's at a hotel probably. Go to the hotel. Where am I going to be playing? Where's the closest Starbucks? Where am I going to get my, you know what I mean? Like, you get all of that stuff and go and like put yourself in it, rehearse it. This is really about rehearsal, and get yourself in it so that when it's time to do it the next day, you've been there. And I know where I am. I've been here before. I know where the Starbucks is. I know where my tournament is. I know where to look for this person and that person and that thing and this thing, and I'm set up and ready, and I can focus on playing.
Okay. And do you have a philosophy, Joel, on like cramming opening lines if you find out who you're playing, say? I mean, obviously, if you have hours, I think it's reasonable to prepare. But what if you have 15 minutes, 20 minutes?
It's never helped.
Yeah, it really doesn't.
I mean, I've done it. I'm like, oh, this guy, he plays X or she plays that. Doesn't matter, Yeah. I don't feel like it doesn't. And the times that I have found that and this may just be peculiar to New York City chess, like playing at the Marshall or at my local club. I find that the preparing for a specific opponent rarely works, just because there's so many variables. that you always end up paired with someone that was not the person you're prepared for. You're like,
Yep.
so that doesn't mean that preparation is no good. It's preparation that you'll use another time. But I have rarely prepared my openings for a specific person and have that be the pairing for that evening.
Yeah.
It's happened like a couple of times, and both times I probably lost. So I don't I don't really, I don't.
I can relate. All right, well, we're going to discuss some more common chess psychological pitfalls, but first we're going to take a break and hear from our sponsors. I've been due for an update from our friends at Aimchess.com. Aimchess, of course, gathers games from the major chess playing sites and gives you actionable intel of what aspects of your game to work on, and it helps you work on them. I've been working on some new openings in my Blitz game. It turns out I'm doing pretty decently with those new openings. Of course, I've got to keep them a secret from you guys. But I still have some other things to work on. Time management slightly better, but lots and lots of room to improve. I also need to work on advantage capitalization and resourcefulness. On the other hand, my end games are doing well and my openings are doing well overall. So if you're looking for that kind of insight, as well as puzzles of tactics that you missed and chances to practice positions you didn't convert, then try out aimchess.com. If you do so, please use the code perpetual30 at aimchess.com. The link is also in the show description. And we are back, and we are going to go straight to the next Patreon mailbag question. This one I and Joel both found relatable, but we'll get to it. So Igor Feinstein, thanks for supporting the pod, Igor. He says, I'm a strictly online chess player, and the vast majority of the time I play bullet chess. I fully acknowledge that it adds no serious dimension to my chess, but I convince myself that it's a type of training tool to train myself to think and calculate faster. However, I've been discovering over and over again that I'm very quick to go on serious tilt after losing just a couple of games. Recently, I went on a tilt that cost me 150 rating points in one sitting. If I want to continue playing bullet chess without suffering psychological harm like my epic tilts, what do you recommend is the best approach? Should I limit myself to a certain number of games per day? Should I bother analyzing my own games, even though most of my mistakes are in a time scramble? Should I take some time in between games, especially after losing? And what is the ultimate psychological reason chess and poker players go on tilt? Are GMs known for going on tilt? End of question. So much resonates. So eager to hear your take.
Well, first of all, the entire game is a time crunch, right?
Yeah,
so
yeah.
You start off in time pressure, right? I don't. Honestly, I don't think this is a chess question. This is more. I mean, what I'm hearing is more in the realm of kind of like video game addiction, gambling addiction, that kind of stuff. I think what I'm hearing is more about getting the next fix from playing, that next dopamine shot from playing your next bullet game. And so when that's the case, I don't think the latter part of those questions, they're the logical part of the mind saying, yes, there are things that you can do. Like should you take a break? Should you try to have a session instead of just sort of an open-ended session, but like say I'm going to play for an hour and put on a timer. There are all kinds of logical things that you can do, and I think that the person that wrote the question and most chess players are smart enough to know or to even experiment with sort of logical efforts. I have struggled with this. I mean, ever since I started playing online, which I have to say is I think, I'm not happy about it. I thought that chess was a lot better when I was just sitting there reading my system, there was, before I learned about the ICC, this was a long time ago, but, that's what I did, right? I would come home from work, it'd be 6, 7 o'clock, I'd have dinner, and then I would sit for 3 hours and I would study my system or reassess your chess or Irving Chernev, those type of things. And I would study and that's how I got good. I'd study hard and now I just like get on and play blitz, right? And so so anyway, so the latter part of the question has to do with sort of logical attempts to deal with what I think of more as a dopamine fix. And I think that, and it goes, and I'm not saying that I'm not saying that like I don't have that. I mean, I get that too all the time. I don't do bullet, but I play 5-minute blitz games and 150 rating points, sure. All the time. Right. I'm terrible. And I even know what at least I think I know what it's about, and I still do it. So I think this is kind of perennial issue for chess players, and it's one that I've thought a lot about. I do think it's more in if you look at the literature on video game addiction and gambling and stuff like that, you'll see a very close parallel for what this person is talking about, what we experience as chess players playing these games. We go on tilt because we're bent out of shape, and these games put you in a very heightened adrenaline rush state, and that can be positive and negative, right? So when you're feeling good, the pieces are moving, you're feeling like things are going good, you're getting your dopamine fix, great, you're doing it. But then you lose and you get negative and you try to make up for your points, and you try to and you start to feel the pressure and you start hating yourself and blah blah blah, and what an idiot I am, and then that snowball starts to go, and you're in this sort of cycle, and that's what poker's called, tilt. And the easiest way to deal with that is to turn the computer off, and he's already answering his questions. The logical
Right.
part of it is there, but this isn't about logic. This is about emotion and how we feel, and the relationship between these online type of games where there's time pressure, and the time pressure gives you this sort of dopamine burst. We're like little rats in a cage pressing a bar for our next fix of cocaine. That's essentially what's happening. So yeah, is it good for your chess? No, I mean, to begin with, I don't think there's a chess player I've talked to, and I've talked to, and you've talked to hundreds, but I would bet you that not a single one of them has said, yeah, bullet's great for your chess. He says that bullet's not good for his chess, so he already knows that it's not good for his chess. I haven't played bullet myself ever, but even the faster games. But I think at 5 minutes, 5 minutes with a few seconds delay is actually a time control you can learn a little bit from. So if you go over a 5-minute game with a good player, you'll be able to see patterns that you would see in your slower games.
Yeah.
So I would 3-2 maybe be the fastest I would do. So that's what, if it was about improving chess, I would go below 3-2.
Yeah. Well, good advice, Joel. And yeah, as I said, I'm as you have, as Igor, the questioner has, I've struggled with this stuff, and for me, the answer had to be cold turkey. I can't play bullet. I can't.
Yeah.
I can't regulate my emotions in bullet. For more on this, I also interviewed Dr. Jana Krivets a year and a half ago, something like that. She's also a psychologist, and we talked about these issues as well. But there's no easy answers. It's still, as you say, Joel, I now play 3-minute or longer, and it'll happen to me now like 1 out of 20 times, usually around like anchoring to some rating that just sets me off. But if it's a bullet session, if I sit down to play 5 1-minute games, it'll happen like half the time or something. So,
Right.
and and it does set up these cycles of addiction where you end up,
Right.
staying up late and the self-loathing that comes with that. And it's
Yep.
just, you know,
It's
if
terrible.
it's painful, but yeah, tough to, it's tough to change at that moment. You've got to do the change like away from when it's happening.
Yeah, I remember I had a neighbor of mine played Bullet, and I remember I saw him in the hallway, and he's like, I just finished 8 hours of Bullet. And I was just like, and I played him. I only played him once, and like he didn't really know, like there was some fundamental problems in his chess, like positionally, just like it was just not very good. And this was at a time where I don't know how good I was at that time. This was, 12 years ago. So I don't remember how good I was. Maybe I was 16, 17, 18. I don't know. I can't remember, but I was better than he was, just sort of like understanding positional chess, and I think he won the game just throwing lots of pieces at me in a quick game. But I just remember that I just finished 8 hours of Bullet chess. Like I can't imagine that's healthy, right? Like it's just not. And I think that happens to people, and I certainly have played several hours, playing Blitz. So the calmer you can be, the less involved you can make the adrenaline, because it's about adrenaline and dopamine hits and that intensity that comes with pressure is what's driving the psychology there. And so the slower you play, which is what Ulf, going back to what Ulf said, right? The slower you play, the less stress there is, because you can sit and think and enjoy. But once you get the clock going, you start to panic. You get that adrenaline rush, you're hitting the clock, and that's when it gets tricky psychologically.
For sure, yeah. Well, Igor, sorry we don't have any easier answers.
Yeah, it's a psychology question. It's not it's not a chess question so much, as far as I see it. I think chess players, and I've talked to people about this, the strong players who also suffered from this, many do, and they have tended to focus on the latter part of those questions. And I don't think that, I think it's about the first part of the question and not the latter part. He's smart. He's a smart guy, Igor. So logical things, you can try logical things. I've tried all kinds of things. And I don't think any of those logical things help. They may help for a minute or a session or two, and then you relapse. I mean, I find it really more the analogy of drug addiction, video game addiction is even better. So read about those things and you'll see yourself. Mm-hmm. And that's what I've done.
But it sounds like you're saying the ultimate answer might be just not to play Bullet. Am I reading too much into your answer there?
At least, okay. At least Bullet.
Yeah. maybe just quit chess.
No, not that. But it's the clock, right? I mean, it's the adrenaline. That's what I'm getting at. It's the drug addiction. So I mean, so there's a neurophysiology going on here. That is what I'm talking about. And so if you, essentially go back to the Narcotics Anonymous, Alcoholics Anonymous literature, what do they say? One is too many, 1,000 never enough. Mm-hmm. And that's the model I think that is most applicable here. And for most people that suffer from this, for me too. So if I don't play this type of stuff, fast games, I do useful stuff for my chess. I start training. I go over GM games. I start calculating. I do tactics, right? Because I'm in recovery. but when I've relapsed, all I do is play Blitz. And I'm just getting the next fix. And this guy's basically saying the exact same thing. And he'll probably just go in circles. So this is the kind of thing that, I would rather treat as a patient, and rather than, it's not a chess question, is what I'm saying.
Okay. Well, again, very, very helpful. And yeah, I think this will resonate with like 80% of the listeners.
Yeah. No, this is the one thing I want to talk about more than anything.
Yeah.
For your listeners and myself, like this is the thing that I've wanted to study from a research perspective. But I mean, I've done it. I've gotten into this and the video game addiction model is the one to read about. If you want to read about yourself, read about video game addiction.
Any particular papers or books that come to mind?
Not off the top of my head, but when I got into it, because I wanted to study it, I wanted to start doing some studies and try to figure out what to do or if there's anything I could do. And, I just got into the video game addiction literature, and that's where you'll see yourself,
Okay.
So.
Okay. Well, on a related question, Joel, I hope I'm not stealing too much of the great material from your book, but one of your closing sentences was, most chess players do not realize that their psychology can be studied, but indeed it can, and the inner strength resulting from such study will pay great dividends over the board and in your life. So I was curious if you have any stories of, I mean, obviously there's highs and lows associated with it, but how do you feel that it has helped you away from chess?
Well, I don't know how it's helped me away from chess. I often have thought about that. It's possible that I think very. I feel like it's, I've thought a lot about this because it's related to the question of can chess help certain types of psychological conditions. For example, I did a study looking at the impact of chess on kids with attention deficit disorder, hyperactive disorder, ADHD, and I think that chess is a real potentially good treatment for ADHD. It targets neuropsychologically. It targets all of the areas, neuropsychological areas that are awry in ADHD, and I think could be very, very helpful from a research standpoint. It becomes very difficult because you have to teach people how to play chess and that kind of stuff. But so I think that it has certain potential benefits, like just from what you're exercising with your brain when you play chess. And I think one of the things that it does teach you is planning and calculation, right? And so I think that one of the things that I feel a lot more, what's the word? Logical? I don't know if it's logical, but I feel like I'm better at planning. Like if I have to map something out, like I push it to the end is better than I used to. You know what I mean? So I can, well, we need to do this, we need to do that, let's do this, that, and the other, and then this, and then what about that? And then it's just almost like you're analyzing a position in your mind, which is the thing in ADHD that's difficult, right? Executive functions are the major deficit in ADHD, and that's that's a problem with planning and attention issues. And so chess is really targets that one thing. The other thing that I would say about this kind of thing is it goes back to Igor's question, right? If we take chess as a self-reflective exercise, then we can learn a lot, right? And that's what, for example, Jesse Cry has been talking about for so long, about the importance of studying your own games. Right. If you do that seriously, which I've never done, but he's too busy. He's too busy to work with me. I tried, talk to him. But I've never done that, but seriously. But I think that if you treat, and it goes back to what Boris said, right? That it will always correct your self-assessment. That's because what he was doing was the hard work of analyzing his games. I mean, you can imagine 1970 in the Soviet Union working with those types of players. You're going to be sitting there going over your games. Like, really, that's going to be intense. Like they're GMs for a reason. And if you do that, then you're going to learn a lot. You're going to come to grips with yourself. I mean, that's what he talks about when he talks about Karpov and Kasparov in their world championship match. Kasparov, for him to equal the score and to salvage that first match, right? It was about getting into the mind of Karpov and learning about who he was as a person. And all of a sudden he starts to switch over. He starts to play the Queen's Gambit declined, right? And the match turns around. And that's the kind of self-reflective process that chess allows. It's a privilege. It's a psychoanalytic privilege, as far as I'm concerned. And Socrates said that the unexamined life is not worth living. I fully agree with that as a psychoanalyst. And in my mind, I've always thought about that psychoanalysis, which I'm a psychoanalyst. I've always thought about what a privilege it is to be able to sit for 45 minutes with an analyst for 4 days a week, which is what you do in psychoanalysis, and reflect on your life and think about who am I and what am I doing and why I do what I do, and that's the part that I've always done. It's like sort of like the main thing I've done since I was young, and I find that chess is like the perfect game for that. Like,
well said. Yeah.
So if you have that opportunity, don't waste it, because it's really special.
Well said. All right. Well, we got a lot more to discuss, Joel. I want to get into books, both from the chess realm and the non-chess realm, as you reference in your latest book. But first, we need to take one more break, Joel, to hear from our sponsors. Perpetual Chess is proud to be brought to you in part by our presenting chess education sponsors, Chessable.com. Chessable, of course, uses spaced repetition to help you remember tactical patterns, opening sequences, whatever aspect of your game that you're working on, and they have a huge library of awesome courses. So whatever it is you want to work on, there's a good chance you can find something to help you on Chessable. Some of their latest includes a lifetime repertoires course on the London from Grandmaster Sahaj Grover and Srinath Narayanan. Now, I don't want you to play the London personally, but if you're going to do it, then this is a good learning resource. Grandmaster Alex Cholovich has a new course on Bobby Fischer's endgames. Of course, the legend R.B. Ramesh's Improve Your Chess Calculation if you really want to challenge yourself. So there's always tons to check out from Chessable.com. They have lots of free courses to check out as well. So just be sure to go to Chessable, get a streak going, and see what they have to offer. And we are back. And Joel, one of the books that you say resonated with you the most in your book is actually not chess related. It is called Golf is Not a Game of Perfect. So, and you reference that in comparison to various sports psychology books that you'd read. So my first question when I read this, because you don't mention golf anywhere else in the book, is are you even a golfer, or did you just read this from a chess perspective?
I love golf, but I don't play. I mean, it's in my family, like my grandfather and stuff played all the time, so I kind of grew up with it around, but it's not something, I've played a little bit, but not much. I watch it. I'm a big Tiger Woods fan, and I remember watching Jack Nicklaus win Masters when I was a kid, and would watch with my grandmother and stuff. So yeah, I love the game. I think it's interesting, although Mark Twain said it was a good walk ruined.
Yeah, it's a great line.
It's one of the great ones.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just, the point, what I thought was really interesting when I was writing the book with Boris and doing research on chess psychology and I read those books, like the chess psychology books, I was like, wait a second, there's all these people. Chess is a sport, man. You're sitting there trying to, win. It's just happening in your mind, but it's still, there's all of this sporting element to chess. And no one is talking about sports psychology. And so I tried to take a little bit from the sports psychology literature, and I thought it was really, really helpful how even someone as accomplished, as I think it was Bob Watson in the book talks about how important it is to train your psychology in golf. And I was like, wow, and now that I think of, you hear it more and more and more, especially in one-on-one games like tennis, right? Tennis would be another one. Every one of these top tennis players has a sports psychologist on their team. And you can see it like when they talk about like who's in their players box with the players. I don't know if you follow tennis, but there's Rafa Nadal, and then they show his coach, and then they show his fitness guy, and then they show the nutritionist guy, and then there's the sports psychology person. Yeah. And it's true for all of them now. They all have their own like sports psychology person. Now, of course, Nadal is the best player in the world, and so on and so forth. But no one's doing that in chess, as far as I know. I mean, it's unclear whether Magnus and people like that can afford to have a chess, to have a sports psychologist. But they have a lot to offer, And one of and I thought that this whole concept of golf not being a game of perfect was, there was so much to think about, like in that book as it was, and apply it to chess, and like goal setting and dreaming big. I thought was really great. That was like have big dreams. That's great. Now, how do you get there? But to have them is really great. And the idea of like, what is your true score? I think of it as true score because I trained in psychometrics. But what is your true ability? How good can you be? And it was very interesting when I played a tournament once, and I did well. And I remember I went to Boris's house and I had a lesson, and he, in his mind, kind of calculated my performance, my performance score. And it was 2,200 or something like that, or 2,150 or 2,200. And he was like, yeah, you see, you can be master strength. And it's interesting that he was less interested or not interested at all in any kind of rating game or average rating, which I also talk about in that chapter. Like the average rating is just telling you about average performance. But if you're interested in how good you can be, hey, look at that. You just played a tournament, you did really well, and you performing at a master level, you can be that on average, right? You just have, you have to get there. So I thought that was really interesting, and they talk about that in a lot of these sports psychology books. They talk a lot about mentalization and goals and all that kind of stuff that I think we need to bring for the chess improvers out there, not for the people that are already really good, but for the chess improvers. Like if you're trying to maximize your ability to improve in adulthood, then you got to put effort not just into chess, but how you improve. Yeah. And to think through, like, how can I do that efficiently? I don't have time to be inefficient, so it has to be done done efficiently, and that includes all kinds of stuff. Like how, for example, going back to Igor, how's that training plan working for you? Right. Like how is my training plan working? My training plan right now is non-existent. And how is that working for me? Well, it's not. Yeah. Right. So the smarter goal approach that I talk about in the book is like, well, reassess. Like, did you implement a training plan? And then reflect back on how's it going? Make adjustments. Keep going towards getting something that's working. okay, what's not working? You know? And again, that has to do with this idea of chess and self-reflection. That doesn't work for me. Why doesn't it work for me? You know, that kind of thing. And you keep doing that, and you keep, you keep paring it down. And I think at some point, as you know, you said, look, playing bullet doesn't help for me. I can't do it. I can't stop the train once I get on it, right? And for me too, like I can't do that. If I'm training, I'm not playing blitz. Like, just not happening, because I can't do both simultaneously, because everything goes out the window. I got to know can't be part of my training game. Playing blitz online, that's got to be my pre-training game, training preparation. And then it's like, okay, if I'm going to make a comeback, if I'm going to start playing again, the blitz is going to stop.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, a lot from there to follow up on. One thing I just wanted for listeners, it's come up on the pod periodically, so I think some of you are familiar with the concept of SMART goals, but it's also mentioned in Joel's book. It refers to a specific type of goal. It's an acronym, which stands for specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, time-bound. And then I mentioned to Joel via email that I hadn't heard the there's an ER added that Joel just mentioned at the end, which is evaluate and reassess, you said, Joel?
Right.
Yeah, which is obviously fantastic advice. So as you say, we all have ups and downs, Joel, when it comes to sticking with regimens. But one thing we haven't dug into too much is like, you made this massive jump that so many people listening would like to emulate. It sounds like you have a very sort of cerebral, big picture approach to chess improvement, which I'm sure helps. I'm sure living in New York City helps, getting to compete without like having to jump through too many hoops. But when you are on a good regimen, what sort of stuff has helped you improve your game?
So when I'm on a good regimen and I'm training and I'm playing, really it's just playing, right? Because once you start to play, you everything just it's like this automatic thing kicks in. You're like, oh my God, I'm playing. Yeah. And it's like, right? It's amazing, right?
It's
and it's
everything
like,
to me. It's the more I try other stuff and then compete, it's everything.
So you play like a serious game, or plan to play a serious game, or start to play, in regular tournament games, and everything kind of falls into place. And you just start training, like whatever, I've got a whole wall full of books, like you do too, right? Like a whole bookshelves full of stuff and books that I want to read and study, and pick any of them. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. Just pick one and start studying. And for example, what I have done, is what everyone does, right? You do some tactics to improve tactical awareness. And then I really enjoy going over games. And I find, like Alyekin's games to be probably like the best, for me, the best game collection, because it's just about the right. I have a really, really visceral response to modern chess books and all of the engine analysis that goes in them. It's like so irrelevant to me, and it has nothing to do with over the board decision making. And I find it to be like, I can't even look at the book anymore. So I really don't even focus on any books that are written after 2000, because they don't help think, I don't care if he's right or not. Right. I don't care. Like, I could care less if the computer finds that H4, H5 wins the game or whatever. That's irrelevant. What's relevant is, his thinking at the time in relation to that player. And it was good enough for him. It's going to be good enough for us. Don't worry about that the computer is now 800,000 points better than he was. That's not important. What's important is that he's a lot better than you. And he's a lot better than his opponent, and he's going to show you his games. And I find that that's just enough analysis, sometimes a tiny bit overboard, but just enough analysis where I have to work. And I think that's really important. Like the idea, what I try to do is to calculate the variation in my head, and that's important sort of calculation training. So just going over the game, over the board with actual pieces, and then when I get to the calculation, try to do the variation in my head. And if I struggle, and if I can't do it, then move the pieces on the board or skip the analysis because it's too much and it's irrelevant anyway. That to me is probably the thing that I feel puts me in game shape the best, because that's what you do over the board.
Yeah, good advice. And you mentioned the Alyekin compilation. What other favorite books do you have for us, Joel? I'm sure you've got a few written before 2000.
Yeah, only before 2000. Besides Lessons with the Grandmaster.
Yeah, which are great, by the way.
They really are.
I'll cop to it. I've only read the first one. I've heard great things over the years. So I've had the ebook from Everyman that I bought. So I have it in Chessbase. As I mentioned before, I like having the books in Chessbase. So I've had that forever. And I only obviously dug into it in getting ready for this interview. But I read your new book in its entirety. But I do. It's a unique style, and I really enjoyed reading it. And as you say, you can play through games in those.
Yeah, I really like those all three of those books. Obviously, I got to write them, so I was asking the questions, and and of course they're edited, so I seem even smarter over the board in the book than I actually am. But I had a friend of mine. I was playing. He was going through the book, and he was like, yeah, it's like there I am. Like my questions are like the questions that he would ask, or the assumptions that I would make about a position, or just like ghost on the board and like leaving pieces on pre and in my analysis, and just having how clearly they see the board, the kinds of moves that they, he would never go for that. Like that's so important. We should really make sure we talk about that. This idea of the internalization of the teacher, the grandmaster, the psychoanalyst. We have to touch on that. But in terms of books, what I like to do is go through the games. What I really, really like more than anything is games, and then a reasonable amount of analysis that I can do in my head, ideally. That's the perfect balance. So actually, Neil MacDonald, I think, does a really, really spectacular job of that. Probably the best of anyone in terms of like modern day writer. Like he has, I forget the name of it, but he did a series with Everyman where something about legends or something like that, positional legends, like with
Giants of Strategy.
Giants of Strategy.
It's so funny that you mentioned that because I have a podcast coming out. We're recording this on Wednesday. It's coming out on Friday, where Karsten Hansen and I discuss underrated chess books, and that's one of the ones I named.
Giants of Strategy is just so good, right?
Yeah.
And he's got a lot of books like that. He's so good at that. Like here's let's learn from this great game. And he doesn't get in the way of the game, but does show a few things that you can calculate on your own. And therefore, you get through the book. There's a high enjoyment quality to it. So you feel like you accomplished something. I just find like that those are great. I mean, obviously, the book that comes to mind in terms of like overall, like how to play chess, I think Reassess Your Chess by Silman is really, if you haven't read that, that's a really good book to go through seriously, like with a board and work through.
Okay, I agree. I mean, I've said before, I should be clear, I don't want to contradict myself. Reassess Your Chess is not my absolute favorite, but it's very good. Okay. Well, Joel, there's so much more on my outline, but as I mentioned before we're recording, you've got to go. My daughter's homesick today, so hopefully we can do a part 2 sometime.
I'd love to.
But any closing thoughts before we say our goodbyes? I mean, I'm sure you have a wealth of stories from all the strong players you've spoken with. Like, among other possibilities, does any of your conversations with, like you mentioned, you talked to friend of the pod, David Smeriton, Kostya, is there anything that really stuck with you from all your conversations and lessons with stronger players?
They all say great things that stick with you, at some point, I guess, for example, I had lessons with Sai Lakdawala, who's a prolific chess author. I think he's been on your
it's always entertaining
podcast, and what did he said that my need to be perfect paralyzes me to inaction, and like I think about that stuff, like those are nuggets of, okay, he's from a chess perspective, he's tapping into a psychological problem about competition, right? And so I find that stuff to be really useful. I think there are a few things that I would like to mention before we end. One is this idea of the ego being a limited resource, and two is this idea of the internalization of the chess teacher or the psychoanalyst or whatever you want to call it. So I'll just say briefly,
sure.
Right? The idea of the ego being a limited resource, this is really, really important. I use this all the time with my patients. When we are at war with whatever, and that would be, you can think of it as chess, life, psychopathology, whatever. You think about your mind as a battlefield, and you think about the forces that you have at your disposal. And imagine yourself in the Civil War, and you've got the Union and the Confederate armies facing each other on a hilltop somewhere in Virginia, right? That's the mind. That's the image that I want you to have in your mind. What would be a beneficial strategy for that fight? Would it be to spread out your forces so that they cover the entire state line of Virginia? Or would you focus on the battlefield and trying to consolidate your forces so that you can protect the battlefield? And the idea there is that if you spread out your army to protect the entire state line, you're going to be weak, right? And you're not going to be able to withstand the fight. And so what happens, the idea of the ego being a limited resource, is that we don't enough, I think, appreciate. I mean, you talk about this a lot in pretty much every podcast. You mentioned this idea, but it's really important. We don't enough appreciate how much we're asking ourselves to do in terms of setting up realistic goals and stuff and training plans. I see all the time these training plans that people put up online, or they're going to train this, they're going to do 6 hours a day, they're going to do 3 hours a day of this and blah, blah, right? And now if you don't have anything to do besides that, fantastic, great. But most of us have jobs and kids and so forth and careers. I mean, for me, I'm a professor, I'm a researcher, I'm a therapist, I've got kids, and at some point at 11 o'clock at night, maybe I'll get to sit down and do a little chess, and the ego, which is managing all of that, it's unrealistic to think that I'm going to get, under those circumstances, that I'm going to, pop up with a fresh mind and do hard chess work, like analyzing games or analyzing positions or doing that kind of thing. It's unrealistic for me to think that. It's the same kind of thing that happens with people. Bulimia is a kind of an eating disorder where there's a problem with sort of the ideal body image that exists in the person's mind and how they're going to get there. So they wake up and they're like, I'm going to starve myself today because I want to reach this ideal state. where I look a certain way, they starve themselves, and then eventually they get too hungry, they get too tired, right? They get wiped out from work, and then they break down. And when they break down, they binge, right? And that is an idea and a model that you can apply to yourself in chess and your chess training. If you think that your chess training plan is realistic, then, or for me, like my chess training plan, like I'm going to do some serious training at 11 o'clock at night, and I got to wake up at 7:30 in the morning to get the kids ready for school. It's not going to happen, right? So you have to be realistic about your goals. And you have to think about the ego being a limited resource, because what will happen is that you'll end up beating yourself up, right? Which is what happens with the bulimic patients, right? You end up beating yourself up that you're not able to meet the goals and the standards that you have for yourself, which are unrealistic to begin with. So that's the idea of the ego as a limited resource. And the last final thing I want to say about the teachers, and especially someone like Boris, someone that you can see and go see repeatedly who becomes your teacher, is that and I think this happens even with reading a book of a great why people get good studying game collections is because that person becomes internalized in your mind the way a psychoanalyst becomes internalized in your mind when you see them regularly every day, 4 days a week, or a psychologist once a week. What would my therapist say? What would my teacher say? What would Boris say? You get answers to those questions. Boris would never put his rook behind that stupid pawn passively. He would sacrifice the pawn and activate his rook. You know what I mean? Like, that's the kind of thing that you get to take with you when you meet and study with a strong player, is that they're kind of on your shoulder with you. And that improves your ability to play.
That resonates, yeah. As I've mentioned before on the pod, I've only had a coach in this most recent spate of tournaments these past 2 years, and the number of times that I think, like, I'm going to have to show this game to Axel, Grandmaster Axel Bachman. It's like off the charts, and it helps because he's, as I've mentioned before, and it's different for every person, but in my particular case, like, when I have an advantage, I need to play more aggressively. So like in those situations, his voice is like ringing in my head, and that's hugely valuable,
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, Joel, Kostya was right. This has been fantastic. Really appreciate you sharing your insights. Totally understand the struggle, but I'm sure there'll be some people rooting for you to make it back to the board at some point.
It's going to happen. I feel it.
Nice. Glad to hear it.
Yeah.
So obviously I'll link to the books. Is there anything else I should link to in terms of people who want to cheer you on?
No, I think that's great.
Okay, great. Well, like I said,
if someone, if they want to ask me questions or something, they can send me an email. That's fine. prof.sneed@gmail.com.
Okay, awesome. All right. Well, this has been fantastic. Like I said, and yeah, hope to get an update at some point down the road. And also, we're not too far away, so hopefully we meet in person.
Yeah, that would be great.
Okay.
Maybe at the Marshall.
Exactly. All right.
Awesome. Okay. Very good.
Thanks a lot, Joel.
Okay. Take care.
Thanks to everyone who helps make Perpetual Chess possible. Big shout out to my producer, Matthew Passy. I'd also like to thank the Blue Wire Podcast Network, with whom we are proud to be affiliated. Be sure to follow us on social media, Beneficial1 on Twitter, @Perpetual Chess on Instagram, or you can join the Perpetual Chess Facebook group. You can email me, ben@perpetualchesspod.com. And of course, last but not least, I'd like to give major thanks to the Perpetual Chess Patreon and PayPal supporters. Those who choose to join that community based on their level of support can do things like submit questions for guests of the show, have access to live Zoom Q&A lectures with grandmasters who often have appeared on the show, going over chess games, answering questions, stuff like that. And you can even get access to ad-free Perpetual Chess if that's your preference. So, but most of all, thanks to everyone for listening, and we will catch you all on the